So hopefully you had the opportunity to reflect on what does it mean to see others as equals, treat others as equals in conversation, and hopefully you had the opportunity to talk about with your partner um, a time when you could see that the status of the two people in the conversation was apparent, and how did that make you feel? Did you feel your contribution was worth the same? And so hopefully you had that opportunity to visit about that. Uh, Belief number two, again, these beliefs will drive your behavior. And so I truly want to hear what others have to say as belief number two. And the focus of conversation should be, the goal should be to be focused on the other person at least 50% of the time. And so some of the things that you can say to elicit those responses, so you are talking about other people, is what do you think about, how do you feel about? Because many times we want to bring in our own experiences, our own stories into a conversation. Sometimes there's a place for that and there's not a place for that. And if we're bringing in our own experiences too much and talking about our own stories too much, then the conversation is not about the other person, or it's not a shared conversation or shared responsibility in the conversation, because now the conversation has become about me and my stories. And so to truly believe and truly hear what others want to say, focus on the other person at least 50% of the time. Be present in the conversation. Not your computer, not your phone, not your watch, etc. Now there are conversations where you can, and you really don't want to be a part of, and they're just kind of casual conversations that maybe you can get away with some of these things. But for the most part, if you're going to be in a conversation where you want to get something out of it, you want the conversation to go somewhere, make sure you're present. The cell phone can be a great tool, but it also can be a nasty tool, and take our attention away from the other person in the conversation. And your timing, you really, and this is difficult to do, especially when you're working with students sometimes, because you have to work with them, and you can't. Sometimes you don't have that time to clear your mind. But going into a conversation, going into working with somebody, let's say we're brainstorming about ideas with colleagues, go in and prepare yourself and clear your mind, clear your heart, so you can fully listen. Because oftentimes if those things aren't clear, you have a million other things on your mind, and many times this first thing comes back into play where I have things on my mind I need to talk about. Now the conversation becomes about me. And so if you clear your mind, clear your soul of all those things, that you can truly then either focus on the other person or have a shared responsibility in that conversation versus it being all about you. Now, we're going to do a little test here on how well you listen. And so the person playing the video here can pause this one, and then we'll play the Double Dutch Brain Game video, and we'll skip ahead to about 34 seconds into the video. You can start it there. And so watch that video. It's about 2.5 minutes to almost 3 minutes long. Watch the video, and then we'll come back and discuss. All right, so hopefully you had the opportunity to watch the Double Dutch Brain Game video, and it really is quite remarkable when you see that it talks about the eyes, and the eyes perceiving things and seeing things and only being able to focus on one thing, when in reality too our ears are the same way, that we really can only focus on so many things at a time, and we lose track and we lose sight of everything else around us. I wish I could have been there to see how many of you actually saw the chicken, how many of you didn't see the chicken, and then even take it further, how many of you saw the background change, how many of you didn't, how many of you saw them switch jump, or people on the jump rope, while you're going through the video. So it's really kind of an eye-opening experience to take a look at that. it is very difficult when you say, I can multitask and I can be able to listen for my phone and listen to you at the same time, or I can be able to listen to the TV and listen to you at the same time with your, let's say, your spouse or significant other or anybody else for that matter. You say you're having conversations while you're sitting watching TV. Oftentimes, your ears are going to go where you're focused. So if you're focusing on the conversation with the person, you're going to hear them. If you're focusing on the television, you're going to hear the television, and not pick up everything that the other person is saying. So we really need to be present in those conversations. You need to actively listen, respond appropriately, whether it's head nods, facial expressions, whatever, but be an active listener. Kind of interesting as you start working with teachers too, that a study was done that the question was basically, my opinions matter at work, and these researchers conducted over 15,000 interviews, and the teachers were dead last on that survey of truly believing and feeling that their opinions matter. And so they're felt that they're not heard. And so as you're working with them, make sure that you gotta keep that in mind, that actively listen, actively respond to them. Be on equal, if you're equal with them and you actually hear what they have to say, or you feel that you're equal and you feel that you're really listening, you're present in the conversation, it could be, the results could be positive on that positive side. And so Jim Knight talks about this last piece on listening is when we listen with empathy to others' ideas, thoughts, and concerns, we communicate that others' lives are important and meaningful. And so, little funny video on listening here. This comes from Wayne's World. This guy is not present in the conversation, not listening at all. You can watch just through the radio interview. And so you can pause the video here and watch Wayne's World. All right, so pretty funny clip there on Wayne's World. Yeah, again, you can tell that guy is totally not in the conversation. But we ended with talking about listening with empathy versus sympathy, and this is a pretty remarkable video. Really touched home as to there's a huge difference between empathy and sympathy. And when we listen to people, we need to listen with empathy. And so we can pause this video and watch the empathy versus sympathy video. All right, so pretty remarkable video, I think. Again, kind of really illustrates the difference between empathy and sympathy. And so what we're going to do here, we're going to do a quick exercise with your partner. What I want you to do is I want you to, the two of you, or if there's three of you, you're going to have to cut down the 4 minutes, but your topic is, what did you do on summer vacation? Person one is the only one that can speak. Person two just has to listen. No talking, no nothing. Just listen. And then flip-flop those roles. And then when you're done with that activity, what I want you to talk about is with your partner is which role was more difficult and why. And the other thing I want you to think about and reflect upon is the person listening. Reflect upon how much more do you think you heard without talking? And we'll talk about that here after you talk with your partner. So you can pause the video here. We'll talk about it with your partner. All right. So with your partner, hopefully you probably found out that some of you probably thought that talking was more difficult because it's hard to talk with only one question. But I think as you got going, most of you probably got through that talking about your summer. Now the person listening probably was, many of you would say it would be the more difficult role. And what I would say is that it's difficult to listen because we always want to respond. We always want to interject our own feelings, our own thoughts. our own stories. And so if you think about how much more you probably heard without talking, because there's oftentimes you'll hear something in a conversation early, you'll have a response to that, but you don't want to be rude. You want to wait. You want to let them finish, and so you're holding on to that response, and it is difficult to do both those, to listen actively and hold that response in your brain at the same time, because you don't want to forget it. You're trying not hard to forget it, and you don't even listen to the last part of the conversation with the person. So just a little role play activity in listening. So just more of a reflection here, as probably the time is running short here, but do you have your own habits that distract you from listening? And can you think of a time when maybe you weren't present in the conversation, or your timing was wrong, where you just weren't in, your heart, your mind, your soul were not ready? And how did that go? And how can you get yourself in the right spot? And so you can just some of my questions to reflect upon as we get into belief number 3. Belief number 3 is people should have a lot of autonomy. Autonomy meaning they should have choice. And it's so crucial, again, to allowing, when you allow somebody to make that decision that directly affects them, the results, again, will end up on that positive side more often than not. Because this top bullet point is so true. People are rarely motivated by other people's plans for them. So think about when you're made to do something versus you choose to do something, and how you feel. A quote from the book, which is so true: when you insist, they will resist. Think about working with kids. When you try to make them do something, they will resist because you insist. It is not their choice to be working. And so do I advocate for giving them a choice on absolutely everything? Absolutely not. But keeping that in mind, when you're working with kids, and examples of when you're working with kids is, we can do this or we can do this. And oftentimes, if you can think about multiple ways to do something with the same target, the same goal in mind, giving them a choice, again, will result in positive results again, just by the fact that they can now choose, how do I get there? It gives shared control. Talked about giving people choice. You let them make the decision. And so thinking about autonomy, motivation, choice, the choice part of any activity, the choice part of anything you do is what can motivate people. So the proper question is not how can we motivate others, but how can we create the conditions within which others will motivate themselves. And so kind of interesting quote by Edward Deasy, and just think about that for a second, that if we can create the conditions within our environment that will give people choice, give people autonomy, that in and of itself can be very motivating. And so what I want you to do is draw a picture that represents your summer. And then just take a couple minutes to do that. The person helping here will pause the video here in a second and come around with a choice board activity where you can create a tic-tac-toe. And when you're done with that, turn and talk to your partner about which one did you prefer, why, and how can you take the concept of autonomy into your job as a para. So feel free to pause the video here and take a minute or two or 4 or 5 minutes to complete the activity and do your turn and talk.